Okay, I'm not a giant. I'm only 5'6". So I think I'm being over-introduced here. It is I must say, it is my pleasure that once again I can speak to the children at SAR, which SAR is, I consider my baby. I have been involved with SAR since 1970, and it's given me great joy and nachas to do that. As far as Yom HaShoah is concerned, it is mostly told, the stories are mostly told by people that are survivors of concentration camps, mainly. I happen to be lucky not to get into a concentration camp because I left Germany in 1939, shortly after my bar mitzvah. I was born in Würzburg, Germany. It's a relatively small town, 100,000 inhabitants, in which lived approximately 2,000 Jewish people. My parents brought me up in an Orthodox fashion, and however, never forced me into doing anything that I didn't want to do. I went to a Jewish school, and what we did is we of course walked, because the distance wasn't that far. It was maybe a 10, 15-minute walk, and we had no school buses. We walked to the school, and we had Hebrew subjects in the morning, and secular subjects we were taught in the afternoon. I went to school starting in 1931 until I left Germany in 1939. I experienced Kristallnacht, which you probably know what it's all about. It was on the 9th of November, 1938, the 9th and the 10th of November of 1938. So I do not know if I should consider myself a member of the Yom HaShoah family. However, I have to go back to a lecture that was given on one of the anniversaries of the Kristallnacht by the dean of SAR, Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, which he gave at the Y up here in Riverdale. He compared Kristallnacht 1938 to what Shiva Asa B'Tammuz was to Tisha B'Av. In other words, it was sort of the beginning of the Yom HaShoah. To tell you briefly about as to what happened. On that day, many of you, some of you may have viewed the movie Name But Not Numbers, which I did many years ago on behalf of the school. So if it sounds repetitious, I apologize. What happened during that period was that I was woken up very early that morning, maybe 6 o'clock or so, by an extreme noise outside my window, people talking and shouting. So I got up. I didn't need the 3 alarm clocks that I used to set in order to wake up. And I got up and I looked out the window and I saw all these SS people around the lantern talking. Shortly thereafter, they came to our house and knocked on the door very hard. And we're going to break down the door to the apartment, which was on the first floor of an apartment building. And as my father opened up the door, they told him to please get dressed quickly because he's going away. So while he was getting dressed, some of them came into the apartment and smashed everything inside, break front in the living room, the kitchen, the dishes, the lights, the lamps, whatever they could smash, they smashed, and took my father away. My father, Oliver Shalom, was about probably a day in jail in town, and then he was transferred to Buchenwald, where he stayed for approximately 6 weeks. He came back from Buchenwald just a day or two before my sister's birthday. My sister, my only sibling, who is fortunately 99 years old today. I mean, not today on this day, but she was just 99 years old. And she was remembering everything, maybe even more so than I do. After about an hour or so after I was up, I walked to the synagogue, which was a rather large synagogue, and had a huge courtyard. In the courtyard, I saw all the books from the shul and Talesim and Tfillin. They were strewn all over the courtyard. I was looking for my talit, but could not find it, even though in Germany, the boys wore Talesim after the Bar Mitzvah, and but I've had another one at home, and I was able to use that. After I got back home and had seen all the damage that was done, my mother took us, my sister and myself, to another family's house or apartment that had been not damaged that day. I then walked during the day down to my grandmother's and uncle's building, which was about 15, 20-minute walk. And I saw that my uncle, who was a butcher, that his store was completely damaged. However, my grandmother, who was on the second floor, had not been touched. My uncle and my cousin and my male cousin were taken away also to a concentration camp, had been taken away. The memories are really very sad, okay. However, I'm grateful that I was able to get out of Germany when I was 13 years old, almost 14, through a Kindertransport, that is, you probably know what that is. It
No,
was
Mr. You could explain that.
well, it was children that were able to get out to various countries in Europe. My sister left for England, and I left for Sweden. I went to Sweden and I joined a group of youngsters the same age as I, and lived in what is called was a youth area home. And what I did is I had to work on a farm when I was 14 years old. And in the late afternoon, evening, we were studying. And of course, on Friday afternoon and Shabbat, we did not have to work. It was quite an experience, as you can imagine. I had no parents. I was in touch with my parents through the mail, but I didn't see my parents again until about two and a half years later. My parents were fortunate to leave Germany in July of 1939. The war was already on, but they were able to get an affidavit to come to America. And so they left Germany through Portugal, Lisbon, and I was able to leave Germany in October. I was able to leave Sweden in October of 1941 and arrived in the United States in November, on the 5th of November, 1941, which was just about a month before Pearl Harbor. And I came to the United States. I learned through a friend of mine, I got a job. I was 16 and a half years old only at the time. I learned a job as a silversmith. And in the evening, I went to a high school, George. I don't know if any of you know it. It's what's called the George Washington High School in Washington Heights, which is where we lived, not too far from Riverdale, actually. As I became 18 years old, it was 18 and a half, I was drafted into the US Army, and I was certainly glad to fight for my country, my adopted country, but which really became my country. And during the war, I was in the ski troops, which I had to get into by sort of applying for it in a way and having to have references that I was able to ski, which I had learned in Sweden.
Mr. Bravmann, how did the ski troops help on the war effort? Could you explain that to the children, please? What was your role? How did skiing help?
How was what? Excuse me.
The skiing.
My skiing?
Yeah, can you explain to the children what role that played?
Well, the role the ski troops played is that during World War II that was, because they still exist today, by the way, the 10th Mountain Division, which it was called, which still exists today. At that time, during World War II, we were in Italy, and we were mostly on ski shoes and on skis themselves, on patrols. At one time, I encountered some Germans, which I took as prisoners, for which I got the Bronx Star. It's a reward, if you can call it a reward. And that was sort of my experience. And of course, we experienced some bombings. I was in a foxhole with another fellow who got a lot of wounds in the foxhole because they were shooting at us. And Hashem was good to me. I was able to walk out of that foxhole without any damage to my body.
Wow.
I think Hashem was very good to me altogether by letting me get out of Germany and not going to a concentration camp, because some of my family, my uncle and aunt and cousins, as well as my grandfather, all went to concentration camps. My grandmother had died before, and my maternal grandmother, my father's mother, lived until 1942 in Germany, and she's buried in Germany in Würzburg in the cemetery. My other grandmother is buried in Darmstadt, which is another town in Germany. And I visited those graves in 1988, when we had a mission to Germany by UJA, sort of on the anniversary of November 1938, the 50th anniversary. At that time, I couldn't wait to leave Germany. Both Ladi and I, Ladi's my wife, blessed memory, and she passed away 2 years ago, as some of you may know. And she and I visited the various graves. My father, my grandfather, my mother's father, went to Theresienstadt. You probably have heard of Theresienstadt, and was killed there and burned and thrown into the river, well-known river in Czechoslovakia called the Oder. I have been back there, of course, to Theresienstadt, just to see what it was like. It was not a nice, good sight. As far as my life here is concerned in the United States, as you know, about 50 years ago, exactly 50 years ago, I moved from Washington Heights to Riverdale and immediately became active in SAR. SAR had just been formed, as you know, by 3 yeshivot, Salanter, Akiva, Yeshiva Salanter, Akiva Yeshiva, and Riverdale Jewish Center Hebrew School. We built this beautiful building that you are in, which I happen to have been chairman of the building committee, at a cost at the time of $3.5 million, which was a lot of money in those days. Most of this money came from the Jesselson family. Dr. Jesselson, who I'm sure you have heard of, who is the one who had asked me to become active at SAR. And I then became, after the building was up, which is an unusual building, and you have to be grateful to Jens Greenberg, because it was his idea to have an open school. I don't believe there were any yeshivot in the United States or any place else that were an open school like the one here that you are in now.
Mr. Bravmann?
That will soon again, okay, and which I think it's an unusual building, but you're also getting an unusual education. I think you have the best principals, teachers in the whole community, I mean the Jewish community, giving you great education, which will lead you to, I hope, a good life in the year.
Thank you.
When this,
Mr. Bravmann, we are so honored and humbled that we are the beneficiaries of all of the building that you have done, both literally and metaphorically, and how you chose to make your life one of building and giving. I'm wondering if I can have the fourth graders type questions into the chat to you now, and maybe you'd be able to answer a few of their questions.
I will try my best.
Okay, we thank you very much. Students, you can begin to post your questions. I'm sure many of you have after hearing that incredible story from Mr. Bravmann. Mr. Bravmann, can you tell the students a little bit about what life is like, what life was like when you were a little boy before Kristallnacht?
Before Kristallnacht, as I explained to you before, I think, I was just, I lived with my parents, my sister. I started school at 6, at age 6, just like here. Okay. I went to shul on Shabbat, of course. We had one shul in town, basically one big shul, which everybody attended.
So children, just like you go to shul on Shabbat, Mr. Bravmann did as well with his family on Shabbat morning, and that's similar to the lives that you live in that way. Mr. Bravmann, a student is asking if you needed to hide the night that the Nazis came into your house and they were breaking things and searching for your father, where you were during that time.
Well, we knew that he was in Buchenwald, okay, but that is about the only thing we knew. We were not in contact with him in any way, and we couldn't wait until he came back. And the reason he came back after 6 weeks is they released certain people at a certain age. And at that time, my father, I believe, was over more than 50. So he was among the people that were released. When he came back, of course, his head was completely shaven. He didn't have a lot of hair anyway. And but he did not talk much about the experience there. The only thing he did, I do remember you mentioning that it was not easy to be kosher in a concentration camp. And,
Mr. Bravmann, we have a question here if you were able to ever have a bar mitzvah and how you celebrated it, if at all.
Yes, my bar mitzvah took place half a year before Kristallnacht. And actually, my bar mitzvah took place on Shvi Shel Pesach, which was a Wednesday. And no, I'm sorry, it was a Friday. And I learned the Seder, did not say the Haftarah, because in Germany it was not a custom for us to say the Haftarah. It wasn't considered an Aliyah. So I learned the Seder, which had the Shira in it. And it's been my pleasure that I've learned the Seder wherever I was thereafter, for most every place, every year, and it gave me great pleasure. I think it gave my children and my mother, Aliyah Shalom, maybe even greater pleasure to listen to the way I lean, etc.
So that was very recent. We could all wish you a happy birthday and a mazel tov since it was just Shvi Shel Pesach. The children are asking how long it took you to get to Sweden from Germany and how it felt to be such a young child and to be so far away from your parents, Mr. Bravmann.
Well, we left Germany. When I left, excuse me, I left Würzburg with my mother. She took me to as far as Hamburg. Hamburg is large, northern Germany. I stayed there for one night with some friends of my mother who had originally, the lady had come from Würzburg originally. And from Hamburg, I went on a train and on a boat with a few other children to Sweden. And then we landed in Malmö, Sweden. Malmö is one of the largest cities in Sweden. By the way, at that time in Sweden, there was no anti-Semitism to speak of, not like today, which is, of course, unfortunately, by the Muslim immigrants in Sweden. And the first Friday night that I was alone, even though I was with the children, I felt kind of very sad. However, after a while, the next Friday night it became much better, and I felt while I was independent, I felt at home because I was surrounded by other children my age, and we had some grown-ups that took care of us.
So it sounds like the children were able to provide some strength to one another and that the adults there did their best.
Yes.
Mr. Bravmann, the children are interested in knowing if your shul that was destroyed, the shul you were bar mitzvahed in, the shul you davened in every Shabbos, the shul that was destroyed during Kristallnacht, if it was ever repaired.
No, that shul was never repaired. It was completely destroyed. There's a memorial there, a stone that stood there, but it does not exist anymore. There was another shul built in Würzburg after the war, which exists today, and there's also a school for children in the same building.
You mentioned, Mr. Bravmann, that you were saved, that you jumped into a foxhole, and that, thank God, you felt very grateful that Hashem saved you in that moment and that you were awarded a brown star for your service. Many children are typing in and wondering if you sustained any injuries while you were fighting.
If I had any?
Injuries, if you were hurt at all.
No, I had no injuries while I was fighting, but strangely enough, I did fracture an ankle while I was in training with the Army in Colorado. And the ankle even today, is, believe it or not, it's a little bit swollen.
Wow. Wow.
I guess the surgeon didn't do his perfect job. I have no pain, and it did not stop me from getting back on skis.
And I could only imagine how much pride it gave you to be able to fight for our country and for our people, for the Jewish people. Mr. Bravmann, we're wondering, we know you gave us a lot of time and shared so much strength with us. What are some parting words of strength that you would like to leave our students and us with? What message would you like to give us to take with us after this talk with you?
The message is really that to always try and do the best for your neighbors, for the community, for people who are not as well off as you are, don't forget them. Say your prayers. Be nice to people. Be nice to your teachers. Needless to say, appreciate the good life that you're leading. Even though right now it's not exactly ideal, but hopefully we will get back to normal shortly. And we will, this experience that we are having now in the United States with this coronavirus will be a distant memory in years to come. However, we probably will never forget it.
Thank you for giving us that perspective from your life experiences and the chizuk for us to remember about always looking around for ways to build and to help others and to reach out to other people. The entire SAR family, everybody on this Zoom and beyond, extends our wishes and brachot to you for continued strength and clarity and wisdom to be able to continue to build for many years to come, Mr. Bravmann. Thank you very, very much for honoring us.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure for me to do this for SAR. Okay?
Thank you very much.
The children soon. Okay?
I'm
Thank you.
just delighted that everybody got to meet you here. Thank you so much, Mr. Bravmann. Thank you, children. Thank you, children, for your questions. They were thoughtful, and we learned a lot from the answers that Mr. Bravmann provided to the questions that you asked. Children, you're going to get onto your link for your first class now, starting in about 6 minutes. Thank you again to everybody, and thank you to Mr. Bravmann's family who joined the kaftals and more.
You're very welcome. And I want to express my thanks to you for listening to me.
Thank you. An honor and a pleasure. And Mr. Bravmann, I've recorded this so that we can share it with you and with your family.
Thank you very much.
Okay, have a good day. All the best. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.